A blast of wind rips through the desert camp as Eli's trembling hands clutch a half-written letter, sand smearing the ink while distant explosions thrum like a warning. He hides behind a supply truck, heart pounding, eyes burning with a truth he can no longer bury. Orders shout across the camp, orders he refuses to obey. Yet he stays frozen, knowing the next minute could change everything. His breath shakes as he writes the final line. A promise too heavy for someone so young. Footsteps approach fast, closer, urgent. Eli folds the letter, presses it to his chest, and whispers a truth no soldier is supposed to speak. Then, silence. A shadow falls over him. Eli rises slowly, the sand crunching under his boots as he turns toward the figure behind him. His pulse roars in his ears, but he forces himself not to flinch. Around him, the camp feels suddenly distant, as if the world is waiting for his choice. The figure doesn't speak at first, only watches him with a heavy silence that weighs more than any order. Eli straightens, clutching the truth he refuses to bury. Somewhere deep inside, he knows there's no turning back. Not after what he's decided. Rowan steps closer, his voice low and edged with worry, not anger. He studies the young soldier before him, seeing fear, resolve, and something else. Something dangerous in a place ruled by obedience. Eli's throat tightens, but he doesn't step back. The world shrinks to the space between them, the unspoken truth pulsing like a heartbeat. Rowan asks the question he already knows the answer to, and Eli feels his last thread of safety tear away. Eli finally speaks, his voice barely louder than the wind, but steadier than he feels. He explains what he saw last night. The small village in the valley, the frightened families, the children clutching their parents in doorways lit by fear. He can't carry out the new orders. He won't. Rowan stiffens, torn between command and conscience. Eli's words cut through the camp noise like a blade, and Rowan's silence becomes heavier than a shout. Jonah arrives breathless, eyes darting between Eli and Rowan, sensing the moment cracking open. He knows enough to be terrified. Terrified of the order. Terrified of breaking it. Terrified of watching Eli stand alone. His voice wavers as he asks what's happening, but Eli gives him only a quiet look, heavy with truth. Jonah understands. And in that moment, a choice forms in his chest, trembling but alive. Rowan orders Eli and Jonah into the command tent, the silence between them heavier than any blast outside the walls. Maps tremble on the table from distant tremors as Rowan asks Eli one final time to reconsider. But Eli's voice stays steady, even as fear claws at him. Jonah stands behind him, torn between survival and loyalty. Rowan's jaw tightens as he realizes the choice is final. The air feels ready to break. Rowan dismisses Jonah, but the young recruit hesitates before stepping outside. Eli watches him leave with a faint nod, grateful yet worried. Rowan closes the tent flap and lowers his voice, revealing the truth he hides behind his hard commands. He once stood where Eli stands now, and it cost him more than he dares speak of. Eli listens, shaken by the crack in Rowan's armor, but he won't betray what he knows is right. Rowan sees this, and his eyes dim with something like grief. Outside, Jonah paces restlessly, heart pounding as he imagines what Rowan might do. He hears muffled voices through the tent walls, sharp at first, then fading into long stretches of silence. The uncertainty eats at him. He looks toward the distant valley, where the village lies hidden in morning haze, and wonders if he has the courage to stand beside Eli when the moment comes. Sand swirls around him like a warning or a signal. He can't decide which. Rowan finally steps out of the tent, his face carved with a decision none of them want to face. He orders them to assemble at the briefing post. Eli and Jonah exchange a look, fear for one, resolve for the other. As they walk through the camp, soldiers fall silent, sensing the tension trailing behind them. Eli grips his satchel tighter, feeling the weight of the letter against his ribs, the last piece of himself he still controls. At the briefing post, Rowan announces the new operation, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. Eli listens, jaw clenched, already knowing he won't follow this command. Jonah keeps shifting nervously, glancing from Eli to Rowan, torn by loyalty to both. The camp waits, unaware that a single refusal will soon shatter everything they believe. A soldier must be. Eli breathes slowly, preparing for the moment he can no longer avoid. The briefing disperses, but Eli remains still, frozen in the heat that presses against his skin like judgment. Rowan watches him from the corner of his eye, seeing the silent refusal form in the set of his shoulders. Jonah steps closer, voice low, asking if Eli truly means to stand against the order. Eli doesn't answer, not because he doubts himself, but because speaking it out loud will make it final. Soldiers drift past them, unaware that the camp is seconds from splitting at its core. Eli grips his satchel, feeling the letter inside, the only truth he's certain of. The world around him waits for the moment he steps forward, or refuses to move at all. Rowan calls Eli back, his voice strained, almost pleading beneath the formality. He dismisses the other soldiers and waits until the camp quiets. Eli steps forward, heart pounding but steady. Rowan asks if he understands the consequences. Real consequences, not the whispered threats soldiers toss around fires at night. Eli nods, feeling the weight of his own breathing. Rowan studies him, searching for weakness or doubt, but finds only a quiet grief in Eli's eyes. The commander exhales slowly, as if preparing to break something inside himself too. Jonah waits outside, unable to stay still. Every few seconds he glances toward the alcove, imagining Rowan's words and Eli's answers. His nerves twist tighter with each heartbeat. He wants to run, to disappear, to pretend none of this is happening. But then he remembers the look Eli gave him, the look that asked nothing yet somehow demanded everything. Jonah squeezes his dog tags, remembering why he enlisted, and wonders if he has the strength to choose differently than fear tells him to. Inside, Eli finally speaks the truth aloud. He will not take part in an operation that harms families who have nothing to do with this war. His voice cracks but does not falter. Rowan closes his eyes, absorbing the words like a wound reopening. When he finally speaks, his voice is quieter than Eli has ever heard it. He tells Eli that refusing will mean arrest, exile from the unit, and consequences beyond the camp's fences. Eli swallows hard, but the fear inside him has already transformed into something stronger. He repeats his answer. Rowan steps out first, face carved into stone, and calls for the nearest guards. Jonah freezes, heart slamming against his ribs. Eli emerges behind Rowan, shoulders squared, accepting what follows. The camp stills. Soldiers, sensing a fracture. No one dares name. Jonah's breath catches as two guards approach, unsure whether to intervene or flee. Eli gives him a small, steady look, not asking for rescue, only for understanding. Jonah feels the world tilt, forcing him toward a choice he cannot avoid much longer. The guards hesitate, unsure whether they're witnessing discipline or betrayal. Rowan's voice cuts through the camp, firm but trembling beneath the surface. He orders them to detain Eli, but he cannot look the young soldier in the eyes. Eli steps forward on his own, sparing everyone the weight of forcing him. Jonah watches, breath trapped in his chest, torn between duty and the truth he saw in the valley. The air thickens with heat and unease as soldiers gather in silent circles, pretending not to stare. Eli lifts his hands slowly, not in surrender but in acceptance, holding on to the only conviction that still feels like his own. The guards bind Eli's wrists, the rope rough against his skin. He doesn't resist. Rowan turns away quickly, unable to watch, knowing that this choice, Eli's and his own, will haunt him long after the war forgets their names. Jonah takes a step forward but stops when Eli gives him a small nod, urging him to stay still. The camp hums with a thick, uneasy silence, broken only by the crackle of distant radio chatter. Eli focuses on the horizon where the valley lies, remembering the faces he saw there. His breath steadies. His choice feels heavier now, but never clearer. Jonah moves closer once the guards step back. He whispers to Eli, asking if this is really worth losing everything. Eli meets his eyes with a calm that scares Jonah more than any battle they've faced. Eli tells him that losing himself would be worse. Jonah swallows hard, feeling something shift inside, fear breaking open to reveal a desperate kind of courage. He glances at Rowan, knowing the commander senses the same storm. The space between them feels fragile, as though a single breath could shatter or save everything. Rowan steps forward at last, voice low and hoarse, telling Eli that the transport to the holding post will arrive soon. Eli nods, accepting each word as if he already made peace with them. Jonah watches Rowan closely and sees that the commander's hands shake. Something inside Rowan fractures as he studies Eli, this young soldier who reminds him too much of choices he once buried. Jonah feels the truth settle. Rowan is not the enemy. The real enemy is the silence that war demands. Eli lifts his chin, ready for whatever comes next. The vehicle stops, engine rumbling like a final warning. The guards step forward, but before they move Eli, Rowan places a hand on his shoulder, a gesture so unexpected the entire camp pauses. Rowan quietly tells Eli that some truths survive even when the world tries to bury them. Jonah watches the moment with rising emotion, feeling something inside him crack open. As Eli is guided toward the transport, he looks back at Jonah. Just once, but enough to anchor a promise between them. Jonah's decision is now no longer a question but a ticking certainty. The truck pulls away, the roar of its engine fading into the vast desert until it becomes nothing but a trembling memory in the air. Jonah stands rooted in place, staring at the empty space Eli once filled. His chest feels tight, as though the whole camp is pressing down on him. Soldiers begin drifting away, pretending they saw nothing, heard nothing, felt nothing. But Jonah cannot pretend. He replays Eli's final look over and over, a quiet plea wrapped in courage he never knew someone could hold. Jonah wipes dust from his eyes, unsure if it's the wind or something else burning there. The world suddenly feels too loud, too bright, too small for the truth he's holding inside. He knows he's running out of time. Back in the quiet of camp, Jonah moves through rows of tents like a ghost, each step heavier than the last. He passes soldiers cleaning weapons, checking gear, eating rations, each of them carrying on as if nothing has happened. The world demands routine, but Jonah's mind is anything but steady. Eli's letter burns in his thoughts even though he has never read it. He imagines the words inside, the truth Eli risked everything to protect. Jonah stops near his bunk, heart hammering, realizing he can no longer pretend he's only a witness. He must choose who he is and what he is willing to carry. Jonah enters his tent and sinks onto his cot, gripping his shaking hands. He thinks of Eli's bound wrists, his quiet voice, the courage shining through fear. Jonah feels something shift deep in his chest, a decision forming out of pain, loyalty, and the sharp memory of the village Eli refused to harm. He reaches for his pack, pulling out a small folded cloth where he has kept things he's afraid to lose. His fingers linger on a blank scrap of paper, imagining the letter Eli hid in his satchel. Jonah swallows hard. If Eli can choose truth over fear, Jonah must choose something too. He stands, breath unsteady, ready to act. As Jonah steps back outside, he notices Rowan standing alone near the command post, shoulders slumped in a way Jonah has never seen before. For a moment, Jonah considers walking past him, staying silent, hiding his fear. But he can't. Not anymore. He approaches the commander slowly, every step pushing against the weight of what he's about to say. Rowan studies him with tired eyes, already knowing Jonah isn't coming for orders. Jonah asks if Eli will be hurt. Rowan hesitates, and that hesitation breaks the last fragile barrier in Jonah's heart. He knows what he must do, because Eli should not stand alone in truth. Rowan finally admits the truth. Refusing an order will bring harsh consequences, consequences he cannot shield Eli from. Jonah feels anger surge through him, not at Rowan, but at the system they're trapped inside. He takes a step closer, voice shaking as he says he won't let Eli face this alone. Rowan stares at him, caught between fear and pride. Jonah doesn't wait for permission. He turns, walking toward the edge of camp, each step carrying him closer to a choice that could cost everything. But for the first time, the weight on his chest feels lighter, because he knows why he's walking. Jonah moves quickly now, driven by a force that feels larger than fear. He doesn't know exactly what he'll do, only that he must reach the transport route before Eli disappears into whatever punishment waits beyond the camp's border. The desert stretches ahead, endless and punishing, but Jonah's steps are firm. He forces himself to breathe through the heat burning his lungs, remembering the village in the valley, the children hiding behind broken walls, the terror in their eyes. Eli saw them. Jonah did too. The truth they share pulls him forward, even as doubt claws at him. He clutches his dog tags once more, then drops them against his chest like a promise. Rowan watches Jonah from afar, feeling the familiar ache of choices he made long ago. The ones that cost him people he cared for. He knows where Jonah is going, and he knows exactly what that choice will put him against. For a moment, Rowan thinks of stopping him, shouting after him, issuing an order that might save him from consequences he doesn't deserve. But the words stay trapped in his throat. He turns away, hands trembling, realizing that these young men are carrying courage he himself once abandoned. The wind stings his eyes, or maybe something else does. Jonah reaches the ridge overlooking the main road just as the transport truck reappears in the distance. His heart pounds with urgency. He crouches low behind a boulder, trying to steady his shaking hands. The truck rumbles steadily, carrying Eli farther from safety and deeper into punishment. Jonah feels fear rush through him. Raw, honest, and overwhelming. But beneath it is something stronger. He whispers Eli's name under his breath, a grounding reminder of why he's here. He waits, counting each breath like a beat before a leap. Eli sits inside the truck, wrists sore, body rocking with each bump in the road. He stares at the slits in the window, catching flashes of sky and shifting dunes. His thoughts drift to his sister, imagining her reading his letter, hearing his voice inside each word. He wonders if she'll ever forgive him for leaving, for choosing a truth that might take him away forever. But even in that fear, he finds strength. He straightens slightly, holding on to the belief that choosing compassion is never wrong, no matter the cost. For a moment, he closes his eyes and breathes. Jonah watches the truck approach the bend in the road, the last place he can intercept before the path becomes impossible to follow. His breath quickens. This is the moment. Either he steps out now, or he loses a chance forever. He rises shakily from behind the boulder, sweat dripping down his back, heart pounding so loudly he can barely hear the engine anymore. Fear screams at him to run, to hide, to wait for someone braver. But he knows that someone isn't coming. So Jonah steps forward, feet sinking into hot sand, and begins moving toward the road, toward the truck, toward the truth he refuses to abandon. Jonah steps onto the road just as the truck screeches around the bend. The tires slam into the dirt, kicking up a violent wave of sand that stings his skin. He raises both hands, breath shaking, knowing this moment could end everything. The truck growls closer, slowing, confused by the lone soldier blocking its path. Jonah's heart thunders, but he doesn't move. He can't, not after everything Eli stood for. The truck grinds to a halt, dust settling around him like falling ash. A guard shouts from inside, but Jonah barely hears it, because through the grated window, Eli's eyes widen with disbelief and something brighter. Ho! Guards leap out, shouting at Jonah to move. He refuses, shaking but unbroken. He tries to explain, stumbling over words as he tells them Eli didn't disobey out of cowardice, but out of conscience. The guards hesitate, unsure how to respond. Eli watches helplessly from the truck, guilt and fear knotting in his stomach. For a brief moment, the world holds its breath. The desert's silent except for ragged breathing and the ticking engine. One guard reaches for Jonah, but Jonah steps back, voice cracking as he begs them to listen. His courage spills out raw and trembling, but unmistakably real. Back at camp, Rowan arrives on a transport jeep, having followed the trail of dust. He jumps out before it fully stops, heart hammering at the sight of Jonah facing the guards alone. He strides forward, shouting for everyone to stand down. His voice cracks louder than the engine. The guards freeze, confused. Jonah stares at Rowan, terrified and relieved at once. Rowan walks slowly toward them, each step heavy with decisions that can't be undone. He looks at Jonah, then at Eli through the window, and something in his face softens. Something that's been buried far too long. Rowan approaches the truck and orders the guards to release Eli. They hesitate, glancing between authority and fear, but Rowan's voice leaves no room for doubt. As the ropes fall from Eli's wrists, the world seems to exhale. Eli steps down shakily, legs weak, but spirit steady. Jonah rushes toward him, stopping just short, afraid of overwhelming the moment. Eli gives him a small smile, grateful, relieved, and stunned. Rowan watches them both with a quiet ache, knowing he is finally doing what he once failed to do. For the first time, the weight on his chest feels lighter. Rowan retrieves Eli's satchel from the truck and hands it to him with a quiet respect. Inside rests the letter that started everything. Eli opens it, reading the words he wrote to his sister. Words meant only for her, but powerful enough to move strangers to courage. Jonah listens as Eli reads softly, the desert wind carrying each line like a promise. Rowan closes his eyes, letting the truth settle in. In that moment, on a lonely road far from home, one young soldier's refusal becomes something larger than defiance. It becomes a message that will travel farther than any of them can see.